What's up, everybody? Your boy Captain Gino here. We're back and we're talking shell bars, the mystical, hard to find shell bars. I'm going to make it simple for you. Before you click away and think, oh, I got to have a high dollar graph to do this, this video applies to everybody across the board. Whether you have a graph, whether you don't have a graph, whether you have side imaging or just 2D, you can get it done either way, no matter what. I'm going to help you find more bars. I don't care what level you're at. I'm going to help you find more shell bars on your fishery and understand what shell bars are going to produce and when they're going to produce, and help you catch more fish right now. Watch this video, go out and lay the hammer down. So, in order to find shell bars and understand, you really have to have an understanding of why a shell bar is where it is. And we're talking mussel shells today. We're not talking clams, we're not talking snails, we're talking about mussels. Why they are where they are, why bass are attracted to them, right? So everything, for the most part, that swims on a lake or river lives off plankton at some point in time in its life. So do shells, right? So do mussels. Only with mussels, they don't have the ability to swim around like a fish, right? They're pretty much, for the most part, stationary. They're not mobile, at least at not a rapid rate anyways. So in order for them to survive, they need plankton, right? So they're going to have to be positioned in the areas of the lake or river, whatever fishery you're fishing, that are going to be most dense in plankton. Generally speaking, it's going to be areas that receive current, right? So if it's a creek, a canal, a river, or a lake, whether it's wind current, generated current because of release in water, if it's a lake with controlled water levels, or if it's a river and it's natural current, rain current, whatever the case may be, areas that receive current, right? So also, knowing that they need plankton to survive and they can't move around, they're probably not going to be in the bottom of holes, right? In fact, they're never going to be in the bottom of holes. At least not that I've been able to find. Maybe someone can prove me wrong. But generally speaking, these shell beds, shell bars, mussel beds, they're going to be on areas that have an incline. This is going to help you eliminate a ton of water, right? So if you have a main lake point on a lake and it receives a ton of wind current, those shells most likely are going to be positioned on the elevated areas or the areas leading up, right? Because that water is going to be the current's going to force that plankton in right into those shells, and it's going to allow them to eat and survive. If they're in the bottom of a hole, they're just going to get covered in sediment. If you ever go to the deepest hole in your lakes, if you have a lake with sediment in it, like we do on the chain, the Harris chain, as soon as you go to that lake and you go to those deeper holes, they're going to be filled with sediment on the bottom, right? So if those shells were in the bottom of those holes, they'd be covered in the sediment. Therefore, they would not be allowed to eat, and they would not survive. So knowing that just about everything in the lake survives off plankton, and those mussels are going to be in the areas that are most nutrient rich in plankton, then that'll help you understand why the bait's there, right? Why shad want to position there, panfish, whatever the case may be in your fishery, why they're going to position there, which is what's going to drive the bass to those bars, right? So in order to find the most effective bars, you then need to know your currents, when the waters are being released, the previous weather patterns, right? The weather leading up to the day before you go fishing or the day you're going to fish. That's going to help you find the bars that are more productive, as well as understanding of where these fish are, what period, what time, what seasonal patterns going on, right? Excuse me there, brain fart. I've been running nonstop. So yeah, when what depth these fish are going to be at. So those are going to be the bars you're going to want to target. So if you follow me over to my computer, I'm going to go ahead and give you some examples to show you some ways to find these shell bars before you get to your fishery. There's a ton of little tricks. If you have a computer or cell phone, it's going to help you save a ton of time, so you're not just out there mapping aimlessly. So come over to the computer. Let's check it out. I'm going to help simplify this stuff. We're going to dumb it down, make it super simple so you can get on these fish. All right, guys, so we're looking at a simple topo map. It's free. I found it online real quick just to kind of show you. We are looking at a map of Harris, Big Lake Harris. So where are these elusive shells going to be? Let's take Johnson's Point, for instance, right? So we're going to go ahead and zoom into Johnson's Point. This is the north area of the map. This would be south down here. So north, south down here. Okay. All right. So we're zooming in Johnson's Point. We know we have a ton of wind out of the north. We also have a ton of wind out of the south. In addition, we have some other currents that we receive on the chain because they control the water levels. But let's go ahead and zoom into Johnson's Point here. So you're going to see some pretty interesting contours right here. And a lot of this is actually covered up by grass. So I like to cross-reference Google Maps to my topographical map. If you have access to C Maps, it's free. If you make it, set an account up, when you zoom in on C Maps, it'll actually show you, it'll overlay Google Maps over top of this, so you'll know. But with that being said, we have an area of incline on a main lake point, right? Very high probability there's going to be shell there. In fact, I do know there's shell there, right? There's a ton of shell. You move around to the back side here of Johnson's Point. So we're moving westward on the map. And there's some pretty interesting little contours here. It's actually more drastic if you go over and graph it now than what they're showing here. But you have these humps and drains that kind of come through here, and you'll find shell on top of all of the little humps, right? Like this little hump right here, a little underwater point. There'll be shell there. It's an area that receives a ton of current, right? So let's move south on the map. And we're all the way south. And here's an interesting main lake point right here, right? This is an area that's going to receive a ton of wind. Therefore, there'll be a ton of current. If you zoom in, you have absolute elevation here and drop off. So that you know that this area here, say this 8-foot contour, this 7-foot contour right here, this is going to be a great area to look for those shells. 6-foot, 5-foot. Those are pretty tight together for Florida. It receives a ton of wind current that blows across here. Therefore, there's a high probability there's going to be shell there, right? So, guys, if you don't have a graph, hop on your computer, hop on your cell phone, get your topo map of the lake you're going to fish, and find these areas before you head to the lake, right? Let's find the areas of interest, the areas that are inclined. There's an incline. We're not going to look for shell in the bottom of this trough here, in this hole in 24 foot of water. Not a good area to look, probably a massive waste of time, right? Why go there? Let's go here, okay? So now we know shells need plankton, bait fish need plankton, shad need plankton. Most shad eat plankton throughout their entire life. Older shad will then, have some lake debris and stuff like that in their diet as well. That's why you'll see them rummaging around the bottom of the lake. But for the most part, plankton is the deal. That's the juice. That's what they need to eat. Even bass eat plankton as fry. So take a look at this area here, right? We have some more elevation, right? So we're going to go from 10 foot of water up to 6 foot of water at a pretty high rate of speed, right? So let's not graph the hole. We're going to come over here and we're going to graph this elevation. We know it receives wind current, right? If you get out in front of the mouth of Palackalaha here, obviously water is released from the Palackalaha River into Harris, another area you're going to want to check for shell if you're at this fishery, right? For moving further north, same thing here, right? So you have water that is released. It's going to come through the Dead River, which they don't have here. But in fact, the Dead River is here. It connects to Lake Eustis. That is a huge pinch point and a high probability for shell, right? You're going to have current constantly moving over top of that. Ooh, look what we have here. So Hickory Point, right? Huge pinch in the lake, right? Gets way skinny. So when we have water blowing down this whole lake, it is going to create an immense amount of current here. So we zoom in. This is a pretty drastic point that we're looking at here. And in fact, I do know there's shell here, but if you were to look, okay, this looks pretty juicy, guys. So this is, if I'm going to a fishery, And I know there's a chance these fish are going to be on shell bars. These are the things I'm doing long before I get to the fishery, right? And then I compare it to Google Maps, right? Because you say you come over here and you're like, ooh, this looks juicy, right? You got some pretty tight contours. This is nice. Probably, let me see if I can get this in your view here. Probably a good area to check for shell. Probably not, because Kissimmee grass comes all the way out to here, right? So that's something you're going to need to cross-reference on Google. Like I said, I use C-Maps. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, we need to, what does a shell bar look like on your graph? So let's take a look at some shell bars, right? There's one covered in fish, right? Pretty exciting. Let's get out of here. And there's one on my 2D. Let's see here. Unfortunately, I do not have I don't have the double return for you here, but I look for the second return that's going to be underneath here. You have to actually zoom in to see it. In order to be able to even achieve that, you need to have this tuned in right here, right? It is imperative. Let me see if I can get this going for you here. It is imperative that at the top of your graph, you have these colors dialed in the best possible, the best you possibly can, right? Your yellow is going to be your hardest return, red a little bit softer, blue being a little bit softer, right? So on your 2D, you will receive a double return, right? And that is going to be a secondary return. That it's a double echo, some people call it. It'll be located below here. You can scroll up. Let me see 1 second and see if I have that in here. I don't believe I do. There's some fish on a shell bar there. I do not. Okay. So if you've ever scrolled up on your 2D, if you were to scroll up here, you would find a second return that runs underneath, right? What you'll end up seeing is blue down here, and there'll be bands of red. The red being the hardest area on that shell. That's what you're going to want to target. There are little cheats, like on Lowrance on palette 13. Green being the hardest here at the top. That will actually show up. You'll actually see the shell on top of the bottom. So you'll see the hardness, right? So another cool little way to cheat is a composition map, right? So if you have Lowrance, you can set up C-maps on your unit for your mapping, and I'll actually show you the hardest parts on the bottom, right? The composition layer. So let's see here. My little mouse. So the darker the orange, the harder. That's the key there. And if you look here, this is Kissimmee, right? So you look at this little incline here, and it's kind of like the edge of a point. Obviously receives a ton of current, really hard spot, probably some shell there. If you look at this area here, there's actually a ton of limestone in this area. It's not shell, but it's just as juicy. Same thing here. You have this incline here, and you have a ton of shell that runs up in this particular area here. And this is actually vegetation that comes through here. So same thing along this point here. And you can find all the little, like, look at this little hard spot right here. Just like a little hard spot in the middle of nowhere. I mean, what are the chances somebody's going to find that, right? You come over to here, same deal here, same deal here. Oh, look at this point that sticks out into the main lake. Probably a super juicy shell bar. Might want to check that out, right? So you can definitely cheat with today's technology. And again, you know, in order to get the composition layer, you do have to have a paid subscription to get that composition layer. But with that being said, you can have access to topographical map for free. This is actually a screenshot I took of my CMAP, right? So you can see where the tree line ends here. This is a point I pointed out to you earlier, which is, let's get on the same page here. It's actually this point right here, right? So we'll go ahead and pull this up. And there she is, right? So this is a huge, I mean, this is like the chunkiest of chunky shell, right? So you have this huge point that comes out, you get a ton of wind that comes across it, boom, there you have it. Simplified, it's not so mystical anymore. I'm gonna spin back around to my other camera, just give me a second. So for you guys that do not have a graph, right? We need to look at the map, study the map, figure out the areas that you're going to target when you get to a lake. And you can literally just use your cell phone. There's maps available for free that you can use on your cell phone. They'll actually show your boat position, the whole 9 yards. Say you don't have a graph at all, right? You don't even have 2D. You know, like, gee, I can get 2D. What do I do, right? Get you a Carolina rig, throw your 1 ounce weight on it, go to those areas of interest in whatever body of water you're in, river, lake, whatever. Take your cell phone, use the map. I think it's what map is that? Give me a second. I'm gonna look it up for you guys. Let's like save you the most amount of time possible. Let's see here. I actually believe I downloaded it because okay, yeah, it's the Navionics app, right? So you get the Navionics app on your phone. I did this because I did not have I was going from like my boat was broke down, I blew my lower. I couldn't figure out how to get my waypoints from a Lowrance to Humminbird, so I had to use this. And boom, so you have, oh, I got waypoints there, I don't want to show you that. But you can actually use something like this, the Navionics app. It'll show your boat position, show you the whole 9 yards. And you can take yourself over and find you some shell with a Carolina rig, some sort of heavy weight. Feel around down there, you're gonna feel it's like dunk, 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 right? So remember, previous weather patterns, current weather patterns, that's gonna help you, and current situation these bass are in, like what stage are they in, where they're at in the water column, right? And then, I don't wanna get too off subject, right? But let's just go, like how deep does a fishery fish? Like how deep should I be looking for shell? Let's look like, 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 times the visibility is what is the depth maximum depth you're gonna go to. And there are some rare instances where you have freak fish that get out a little bit deeper than that. And oftentimes it's because the water is a little clearer than you believe, that top layer. Maybe you have pollen on top, or you have some sort of bacteria growing up top, and the lower part of the water column is actually much, much clearer, which is the case on Harris. I actually dropped a camera in the lake and recorded all the way down. It was like 1,000 times clearer than I thought. I was in 12 foot of water and I could see fish swimming around down there in a low light situation. Long story short, 2 to 3, 4 times maximum depth of the visibility. So you stick a paddle in the water. If it's 2 feet, let's look like 6 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot maximum, say, as far as depth goes. So, guys with good electronics, simply use your 2D is going to show you everything. Literally, that second return, that second echo that's going to be below your the reading of the bottom, right? So if you scroll up on Lowrance, you can literally set the depth. Say you're looking at 8 foot of water, just set your depth to 15 foot. And that's going to keep the bottom higher up on your screen so you can see that double return as it goes by. And the more dense area in that double return, that's going to be the sweet spot. Guys that have souped up, graphs, say the new Lowrance Lives, like I run a Gen 3, you're not seeing shell in that side scan. I don't care who you are. It's not going to happen. But like the Lowrance Lives, or even like a Gen 3 bird, you can actually kind of see the shells a little bit on your side scan. But the most important part to understanding bottom composition, the bottom hardness of your lake, is your 2D. You need your 2D to understand that bottom composition. Because, you know, above and beyond shell, there's other hard spots in these lakes that are going to produce big stringers of fish year round. So we need to understand that, guys. You get an understanding of that, it's going to save you a ton of time. So finding shells. What do shells need to live? Plankton. Bait fish need plankton. Bass are attracted to bait fish because they need to eat bait fish so they can live. So you're going to find, and another little trick too, guys. Listen, if you find an area of your lake that tends to have more shell bars than the other, like the rest of the lake. Say you get on, you know, the south end of a lake or the west end, whatever the case is, and there's just like a ton of shell down there. There's an immense amount of bait. That area can support a very large biomass. So there's a very high probability some of the biggest fish in your lake are going to be in that area, as well as there'll be more fish in that area, right? Each area of your lake, you have to look at it as its own ecosystem. It can only support so much biomass. So if you don't have a ton of plankton in the area for these bait fish to eat, it's not going to support a lot of bait fish. Therefore, it's not going to support a lot of bass. And most instances, your bigger fish are generally going to be in the areas that are more nutrient rich in your lake. And you will find that almost every lake has one of those sweet spots that are a little bit more nutrient rich, therefore can support a larger biomass, and it's going to help lead you to more and bigger fish at a much, much, much faster pace. So super simple, guys. Topo map. Study your map before you get to the lake. Look for inclines that are going to be in areas that receive current. This is going to lead you guys to the shell bar, and then use your 2D to look at the composition, right? The bottom hardness. On the top of your 2D, no matter what palette you use, those colors I showed you up top, those are going to be in order of hardness to softness, right? The hardest area to the softest area. Those colors need to be as close in width as possible. You need to have that 2D dialed in, right? And you're going to find the hardest bottom using that, right? If you guys still don't understand, you need further instruction on this, just leave so down in the comments section. I'll be happy to drive over some shell in my boat and record in real time for you guys. Me going over some shell. The images that I did show you are all images from my personal graph. I did not steal them off the internet. Those are real shell bars with the real fish on them. If there's anything you guys need, any question you may have, I know you guys have been requesting this video for a while. I'd love to get it to you. Sorry I haven't got to you sooner. I've been absolutely slammed. I've not had a moment to breathe to get these things done. I'm super behind. I'm going to get caught up for you guys. I have the MLF BFL here tomorrow morning on Toho, and then I'll be back to pumping some content out for you guys. I've been kind of consumed and haven't been able to get behind the computer and get some things finished. But as always, please like and subscribe if you're into this kind of content. If you feel like I missed something, if there's something you didn't quite understand, maybe I wasn't thorough enough, please leave so down in the comments. You see that I answer those questions as quickly as possible. I'm constantly looking on there so I can kind of keep you guys informed. And until next time, everybody,